Mining.com.au is back, and for something a little different, I have two guests joining me for a deep dive into what is a prospect generator model. Joining me is friend and co-founder of Battle Bank, Rick Rule, as well as hopefully soon-to-be new friend, Jeff Phillips, a strategic investor. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure, Shae.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I appreciate your patience in the many attempts it took me to get that intro out. Please forgive me, but I'm actually super excited to talk about a particular topic today, which I feel Australians don't have enough knowledge on. So I really do appreciate your time. We're going to kick off with you, Rick, and that is starting with what is the prospect generator model? Because we don't have many of them here in Australia.
The prospect generator model refers to companies that I would describe as management heavy, but perhaps asset light, in the sense that their business plan is that they use their technical acumen and perhaps regional expertise to develop exploration concepts, stake the concepts, map out a thesis to test the concept, and then sell the opportunity to a different mining company. They provide the intellectual capital, and the joint venture partner provides the physical capital. The rationale behind that is, at least when I was in university, I was taught that 1 in 3,000 mineralized anomalies becomes a mine, which suggests that the typical sole risk exploration junior has a 1 in 3,000 chance of giving you a 10-to-1 return. It makes one of the Australian state lotteries look like a good deal. Prospect generators do a different thing. The idea is that a company can generate 3 or 4 or 5 projects a year, farm them out, take back a royalty or a 20 or 30% carried interest. You end up with a shopping bag full of lottery tickets or partial lottery tickets paid for by somebody else. Critics of the business plan say that if you succeed, you don't end up with a whole project, ignoring the math that you have a 1 in 3,000 chance of success. The other thing that you get with prospect generators is that you tend to get extraordinarily competent technical people. They have to be good enough at what they do that they engender the respect of the third parties, the companies that are going to farm into them, which are generally a more discerning audience than the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers that make up the sort of retail mob of investors. The process is honest, too. If Jeff and I were to call up a geological consultant and ask him or her to review a project for us, they'd charge us $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 and try and write up a report in a way that would cause us to hire them again. Prospect generators don't sell these things to consultants. They sell them to major mining companies. And rather than receive a fee, the major mining company writes a check. So that means that the analysis that goes into these things is much, much, much deeper than might be done, by the way, by a sell-side firm that gets a commission for raising the money. Altogether, I think a much more honest process.
Rick, you've hinted at what you like about prospect generators in there, and we'll hopefully pull on a few more of those threads in a second. Jeff, what is it that you like about prospect generators in particular?
Well, I learned about prospect generators from Rick Rule. So, Rick's sort of a mentor of mine, and I've known Rick for quite a few years. And we won't say how many years, Rick. That would put us both over 40 probably. So, but again, Rick pretty much summarized it, but you're having other people that are technically pretty sophisticated at major mining companies do the due diligence. I will add, though, that, and Rick knows this, that not every prospect generator is the same just because they're a prospect generator. You might look at one prospect generator and they may have 4 projects joint ventured out, and those may be to juniors. That's obviously not as enticing to me. I don't want to speak for Rick, as if I've got major companies with deeper pockets doing those joint ventures. It doesn't mean I don't mind seeing another smaller company doing a joint venture. So again, it's the quality of the management teams in the prospect generator and those deals that they can cut. that make the top tier prospect generators. I think you'd agree with that, right, Rick?
I absolutely would. Shae, here's a statistic that I think your audience could use to get the point. I have invested now over 40 years in something like 70 prospect generators. I'm old enough that I don't remember how many actually. Uh, and those 70 investments have generated me, as of the last time I checked, 25 economic successes, which is to say that's a better than 33% hit rate in a business where the expectation is a 1 in 3,000 chance of success. Statistically, it turns out that prospect generation has at least two standard deviations higher probability of success than any other form of investor led exploration finance. One thing that I want to add to Jeff, what he just said about the beauty of farming out to majors. Uh, when I walk through, tech in Vancouver or BHP in Melbourne, and I walk through a building that has 200 geoscientists, if I farm out a project to them, I have the advantage of all that expertise, more expertise than I could possibly feed and shelter in a junior. And rather than me paying for them, they're paying for them. These major companies bring more than money. I can't tell you over the last 4 decades of investing in prospect generators how good it makes me feel to know that the geological team at Newmont or BHP or Rio or Teck is doing all this work on my behalf. If you farm out to a major mining company like BHP, it is unlikely that any rock assemblage that you throw at them, it's unlikely that they haven't seen it before. And you can't afford to hire that range of expertise within a junior.
You certainly can't. And I know both of you have recently taken a strategic take in an Australian company called Kincora Copper. And we're going to get to a little bit more about Kincora Copper in just a moment. But when it comes to both of you, I'm wondering if you both have the same view in what you're looking for. Rick, I'm going to stick with you for the moment. What are you looking for in particular when it comes to taking a stake in a prospect generator? And I'll come to you for a follow up on this, Jeff, in a second.
I want the management team to have some clearly definable competitive advantage that the industry recognizes. Uh, If I'm looking at a single project company, they have to sell me on the project. If I'm looking at a prospect generator, I don't give a damn what I think about the project. I care what the industry thinks about the project. I want a management team that has a good enough reputation in some specialized field. Not all things to all people. It might be a terrain, it might be a deposit style, it might be a geography. Prospect generators are intellectual capital businesses. They're like high technology companies. It's all about the scientist. So the first thing that you look at is definable competitive advantage that's recognized by the industry.
Jeff, what do you look for when it comes to a prospect generator?
Well, I sort of look for the same thing. I look even in a single project when I'm evaluating, like Rick's talking about. What I look at is sheer structure and people. So, obviously Rick spoke to people. You want competent people. If it's a prospect generator, I want geologists. I want management. Even a non-prospect generator that's done something before. They've actually made a discovery. They've actually created shareholder value. So obviously Rick was talking about the people, and then you get the added benefit with a prospect generator that you've got these huge companies, if that's who they're joint venturing to, that have a ton of staff that would cost me a fortune to have evaluate stuff. So I've even got more people looking at quality people who've made discoveries before. So again, people is very important. The second thing is share structure, whether it's a prospect generator or I want to make sure that they have a plan to raise capital if they can execute at higher prices, and they have both management and shareholders that are on the same plan. Unfortunately, a lot of junior mining companies don't follow that plan. I think Rick would agree with that. They're mining something, but they're not looking to mine actual minerals. So
Jeff, go a little bit deeper into share structure because one of the beauties of the prospect generator is that they don't have to dilute to explore their own project because somebody else does it. And what that means is that you don't end up with these hyper Australian 10 billion share floats. Talk a little bit about prospect generation
Correct. The
And
prospect generator has a leg up on a regular exploration company anyway, because like Rick said, that you are dilute you're taking part of the project and giving that away, but you're not going to have that massive dilution as you continue to drill for, say, a copper gold porphyry that can take some time to find. And it can be massive dilution. So a prospect generator from the very start, the first part of share structure is the number of shares outstanding. So prospect generators tend to have less shares outstanding because they have other people at the project level risking their money. But I also take it a step further, whether it's a prospect generator or an exploration company or a development company. I want to know that management and who the other shareholders are in that deal. I don't want to be in with the butchers, candlestick makers, and whatever Rick said up out of Canada and Australia that are just in this to collect warrants and not develop something. So I want to see that management has skin in the game. I want to see that hopefully there's other large shareholders that are actually reporting and the management and board are reporting. So Rick and I have done, Rick's been doing prospect generators. I've been in prospect generators for a long time, but recently we happened to participate in 3 or 4 different deals that are all prospect generators. But what those companies all have in common is that management or a significant shareholder owns 30% or more of the reporting shares. So effectively, those shares aren't for sale. They're trying to build something. And then when someone like Rick and I come in and others into something like Kincora, we've done this in several deals, we actually locked our own stock up for a year because we wanted to make sure the other shareholders that were investing with us at least had some sort of, a year is not that long. It's a lot better than a life financing that's a 1-day hold. But the fact is we want to see the companies be able to execute and hopefully raise capital at higher prices. And if the effective float of the company, because management owns a big chunk and other large shareholders that report own it, and we're willing to do that, it means if they have success, they're likely going to have a higher share price. A prospect generator already has a better share structure, and they're going to be able to raise capital, which is beneficial to me because I want it to be at higher prices, not lower prices.
What I'm essentially hearing, and I sort of want to double down on this point, is management having skin in the game means they're not just here for a quick return after 6 months or a year. You know that they're looking, sort of further ahead the field than just quarter to quarter.
And they get penalized if they fail.
Yes.
Yeah. I liken it to getting in a boat with a group of people. A company to me is kind of like a team. The other shareholders, Rick and I participating together in deals and management. It's like getting in a boat. And most of these people get in a boat and they're jumping out before they leave the harbor in the junior resource space, especially in a good market like we have now. I want to make sure that everybody's rowing for a common goal to get across the body of water, and that I don't have people I'm not the last guy on the boat without a life jacket. So again, I want to be in with, again, it doesn't mean they're going to, just because it's a prospect generator and just because 50% of the shares are essentially locked up, doesn't mean they're going to be successful. But for those people to make money, they actually have to develop an asset. And usually the people that are willing to do that are the people that have been successful before. So.
Rick, I'm going to come back to you for one moment because, as I said at the start of today's conversation, prospect generator model isn't common in Australia. I think there might be maybe 2 or 3 listed on our Australian Securities Exchange. Rick, you've been kicking around the Australian markets for a while now. Why is that? Why aren't we embracing this model?
There's some great prospect generators in Australia, but they're private.
Yes.
They are people who generate projects and farm them out, and rather than assign the carried interest of the royalty to the market, keep it in their back pocket. There was a guy you may have heard of named Creasy.
That was exactly the name that sprang to mind when you said they're private.
Really smart guy. And he has made so much money with discoveries that he doesn't need my money anymore. He doesn't bother with the listing fees. He doesn't bother with investors that jump ship. Australia's had some great prospect generators, but they've been, for the most part, private exploration consultancies. The first prospect generator that I remember in Australia was probably Golden Cross. Interestingly, active in the Lachlan Fold Belt, which is topical for another reason that we'll talk about later. But there has been, as I say, there have been prospect generators in Australia. It's just that they've been normally private.
Which is a shame because I think they offer excellent opportunities for investors that don't know how to pick an exploration stock. As you started today's conversation, prospect generators do more of that work for the investor. Uh, Rick accidentally gave a hint of what my next question was going to be, and that is the Lachlan Fold Belt. Listen, I've been a fan of it before it was cool. Jeff, I know Kincora has major projects that they're working on in the Lachlan Fold Belt. What about this area in Australia do you like?
Well, again, it comes back to people. If you want my geological opinion on anything, we're going really low on the knowledge scale. I back people, and when I look at the technical team at Kincora and their background, with Newcrest and the discoveries they've made in Australia, I'm really not going to. It's kind of like having a major joint venture, and I'm not going to question, especially when they're locking their stock up and the share structure is the right share structure. These guys have made some big discoveries in major belts in Australia, and several of these projects that are joint ventured out with Anglo, and several others that I think will be joint ventured out with others soon. These are projects that they were their pet projects. They love these projects, and because of other discoveries, which are massive discoveries in Australia, they didn't see the exploration at the time they would have liked to seen when they were at Newcrest. So this isn't just they went out and found some new properties recently. These guys have had some favorite properties since the 1990s. And these properties are in Kincora. And again, when you look at Kincora, the structure is, basically 40 million shares out, 50 or 60% is effectively not in the float. And they've got partners like Anglo that have vetted two of these projects and three other joint venture partners on other projects that have vetted these. I think I don't need to know a lot about geology when I've got those types of people involved. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's actually a great answer. You make an excellent point about how 50 to 60% of the shares are not involved in the daily flow. So they've got a really sticky shareholder base. So that's obviously there for a reason. But Rick, I want to give you the chance to maybe flex a little bit of your geological knowledge on the Lachlan Fold Belt.
Well, I love the Lachlan Fold Belt. I like active subduction zones. I like subduction zones. I like big copper gold porphyries. The Lachlan Belt in particular. Funny story. 1990, I was having lunch in Los Angeles International Airport with Jim Askew, James Askew Consulting Engineers, blah blah blah. I mean, an absolute Australian superstar. And we were talking about Olympic Dam and Australian copper. And he said, well, if you care about copper in Australia, you care about one thing, really, the Lachlan Fold Belt. Otherwise, go to New Guinea. And I remember in 1990 him telling me that. And I was blown away by the whole lunch. I mean, it was just one of those sort of epic learning experiences where you get to sit at the feet of a couple of masters and come away. And I went home and looked at my notes from that lunch. I know it's impolite to take notes at lunch, but I did. And I started boning up on the Lachlan Fold Belt. Some years later, and I'd done a fair bit of investing by then, but some years later, Brent Cook came to work for me as a geo, and Brent Cook, after when he went on his sort of, you guys would call it a walkabout, I guess, went to Australia, ran out of money, had to go to work as a geo, and he was posted among other places to the Lachlan Fold Belt. So I asked him about it, and he said, it's hard to explore. Uh, it's a paleo fold belt, uh, which means there's a lot of cover and stuff like that. But it's by world standards, porphyry standards, drive up. It has a lot of advantages, and it has some pretty spectacular geology. So that was sort of confirmation that on one hand, you get this absolute dean of Australian mining, a guy who's been part of the start of 8 successful public companies, Jim Askew, and then you get this uh, just nuts and bolts, boots on the ground, accredited terrain geologist Brent Cook coming back saying the exact same thing.
I think, can I add something, Shae? Just because Brent Cook's name came up, and I'm friends with Brent also, and Brent does some independent, obviously with my knowledge of geology, I have to use people like Brent, and he's looked at quite a few things for me. But On the Kincora front, I think you probably noticed a couple of weeks ago, Brent Cook joined the advisory board of Kincora, and both Rick and I obviously respect Brent, and that's a major plus. Not because he is familiar with that area, and happy to have him involved.
I'm absolutely thrilled to see Brent Cook joining the board. I think I've said before in other conversations that I might have a slight crush on how remarkable that man is. So I think any excuses that get him out to Australia is great. But it's also
Did he pay you to say that?
he did buy me a margarita. I will just let you know that, and we all know I love.
He speaks very highly of you. When I said I was doing this interview, he says he wants to do an interview with you, so you'll have to reach out to him.
I absolutely will. Oh, good. We can get even nerdier over the geology in the Lachlan Fold Belt and his time in Australia. Look, gentlemen, I guess that brings me to the part of today's conversation where we sort of danced around why Kincora. I mean, look, obviously they've got some great projects in other jurisdictions than the Lachlan Fold Belt. Jeff, you touched on it lightly before. What really was the standout feature of Kincora for you?
People and structure. So I often say those words repeatedly in interviews. But again, I look at the resource market. I've got 3 or 4 prospect generators. I tend to have a basket of a dozen or more companies in these types of markets that I have large positions in, and it's all whether they're prospect generators or developers. I'm looking at people and the share structure, and that applies across the board. Kincora, again, has all the earmarks. They've got the people, they've got the joint ventures, they've made major discoveries before. The inside ownership is impressive. We've brought in a new group of shareholders that are a little bit longer term than your typical natural resource investors. But again, that being said, I am a large shareholder. I do consult for the company. I'm not giving any investment advice. Rick and I have done several, and Rick's got more than I do, but we've recently financed a couple of other prospect generators like Headwater Gold that's in Nevada. Again, similar thing where 30% of the stock is owned by management and directors. Latin Metals, where the chairman of the board owns 45% of the reporting shares, so half the company is owned by the chairman of the board. People often ask me to rank my 12 stocks, my favorite to my 12th favorite. And the fact is that whatever I think the best one is, it tends to be one near the bottom of the list. But they're all good companies. But again, this is we're speculating. This is educated investing, I guess, or speculative investing. So again, Kincora has all the earmarks, but you need to have a basket of these stocks. And I like Kincora because again, they've done it before. They've made big discoveries, but I don't have a favorite child. As long as one of them goes up 10,000%, Rick, I'm pretty happy. So.
Rick, we've talked about some of the big names that Kincora has done JVs with, which is, as you said, validated their concept. But is there anything in particular when it comes to Kincora that stands out for you?
Well, I'm a sucker for big deposits. Big deposits have made me big money. So I'm much more excited about a big copper gold porphyry than I am a small high grade, skarn gold deposit. And I believe that the Lachlan Fold Belt has the chance to yield. I'm not saying that it will, but it has the chance to yield me a discovery that's $10 billion or $20 billion in situ recoverable reserves. I like the Fold Belt. I was attracted to it. I like Australia. I was attracted to it. And here's a company that is looking for great big deposits. They're not looking to corner shoot somebody else's discovery. And their expertise in the belt is respected enough by industry that the biggest companies in the industry are farming into them. It isn't often that mortals get to invest alongside, or better yet, own a promoted interest in a company that a major mining company is earning into in a belt that's a proven belt that has a chance to yield an absolutely positively tier one discovery. Anglo's not looking for a little deposit. Those, that's what I like about it. And I said earlier, focused expertise. These people are well enough known to the Australian industry with regards to the Lachlan Fold Belt that they have this specialized expertise recognized by the industry. That in conjunction with looking for a large deposit and being prudent with money, which these guys are, that's really where I'm at.
Seeing as both of you gentlemen have just been in the process of, taking up a placement for this company, obviously you're both in the process of also taking the name of Kincora across the North Americas. Jeff, I'm going to come to you to start this answer and Rick to sort of finish it. How have you found the reception has been to these types of projects in Australia? Jeff, has there been much education that you've needed to do?
I think, again, there's always education when you're talking about the retail, most of your listeners are in Australia, but again, if you're not in Australia, you can do your own due diligence. You can pick up the phone and call management. You don't have to take Rick and I's word for it. Look into these companies, and again, have a basket of companies because it is speculative investing. But do your own due diligence. And Rick's modest, but one of the best conferences here in the United States, along with a couple of good ones. But Rick has a conference every July in Boca Raton, Florida, and he has some of the best companies in the industry that he's financed and has money into. Doesn't mean they're going to be successful, but he's done due diligence to make sure that he's separated the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. And there's a lot of chaff in this business, so attend some of these conferences. I know Carrie Stevenson, who's also on the board of Kincora, just had her gold conference. I think it just ended a couple of days ago. I had the pleasure of meeting her 13 years ago through another mentor of mine, Mr. Jim Dines, who traveled as the keynote speaker there. So go to these conferences, meet management, and educate yourself. But the Kincora story is, we understand the prospect generator model over here. There's quite a few prospect generators listed on the Canadian exchanges. And, again, not all of them are the best run companies, but some of them are incredible. So if you follow the model correctly and execute, and Kincora is one of those companies that I think would be in the top of the prospect generators for the types of partners, the types of things they're looking for that are meaningful and big, like Rick said. If you find a $20 billion asset, and you've got partners that have deep pockets to do that, the reward could be quite stimulating. So
Thanks for reminding me I missed Boca Raton this year. I'm still a little sad about that one. Rick, and just to take this conversation home, look, I know you're no stranger to Australia, but when it has come to talking to potential investors about, little old Australia, in spite of the fact that we're quite huge, and the infrastructure and the geology there, do you find that when there's a lot of questions that some North American investors have?
Not at all, particularly people who've been with me for a long time. I've been investing in Australia for almost 50 years. I go back to Decrepney in Normandy. That's how far back I go. So that was 45 years ago. One of my earliest mentors in mining finance business was, in fact, Robert Decrepney. Um, Australia's been extraordinarily good to me, and it's been good to people who have invested alongside of me for 4 decades. My greatest single stock market success in terms of percentage win actually came out of Diggers and Dealers. I was sober long enough to discover Paladin in 1998. And that was at the beginning of the exercise, a 1.2 million Australian market cap was free. So Australia's been good to me, and prospect generation's been good to me in terms of spreading the message about prospect generators. There's a coterie of investors who've been alongside me for 30 years, and they don't need to have the arithmetic about prospect generation explained to them. They need the business proposition with any single prospect generator. What's the definable competitive advantage? Who are the joint venture partners? What are the third party expenditures relative to G&A? There's a whole bunch of metrics around how you evaluate a prospect generator. But there's a coterie of investors, well over 1,000, who have been around me for 30 years, who are members of the Rule classroom. They don't need a tune up on prospect generation.
Listen, gentlemen, we are about to run out of time. I want to say thank you so much for being here today. I've thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to our next one.
Shae, I look forward to having you in Boca Raton next July. No excuses.
I will not miss it this time. I also hope I don't get trapped in a hurricane in Houston as well.
I realize that you have experienced some travails getting to my conference, and I appreciate that. And Jeff, I'd like to correct you too. Mine isn't one of the finest natural resource investment conferences. It is, in fact, the best.
It is.
It is the best. I
That's
enjoy
good.
right up there. I enjoy Brian's Gold Conference. You and I will both be out in New Orleans, but bar none, Boca Raton is one of the best run conferences, the best run conference. I'm trying to be politically correct here, but it's a great conference. So, and I should disclose also that I want Rick to get off the call here because I want him to go back to work for Battle Bank because I'm a Battle Bank shareholder. I want to disclose that also, so I'm rooting for him.
Well, then I won't steal another dollar from you, Jeff, while he's here sitting talking to me. Gentlemen, thank you so much for today. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Shae.
Thanks for having me.